So in today's episode, as a celebration for the 10th anniversary of Kamen Rider OOZ, we will be making some cell medals from the TV series. But you're probably thinking, who's this guy? So we got CBStudios back for another episode.
Well, hey!
Because he is the master of the forge and he will be helping us forge these.
Not
items.
a forge, it is a camp stove. We are professional.
Let's get into the episode. Woo! So anyway, what we're going to do, as I explained, is we're going to turn your basic Japanese toy metal. We're going to cast it and pop it into a medal. We're going to pass it over to the master for a quick overview of what we're going to do.
We are trying to replicate the plastic coin, this lovely little metal here, and trying to replicate it in a low melt alloy or pewter. The main things that we need to do with this is we do need to fill in this little groove around here because it's two parts that are stuck together. We're going to need to set it down on a bed of plasticine so that we get a nice even line the whole way around. We'll build a box around it. We'll pour a bunch of silicone on top of that. We'll then wait like a day for that to cure before you can flip everything over, pull out your plasticine, spray in some stuff to stop the silicone from sticking to itself. And we'll pour more of it and wait another day, and then we can cast the metal pieces. So basically, we're making this lovely little brown lump of really rigid rubber. And you can see it's a little bit charred. It's actually got graphite powder in there to help the pewter cast really well. We've gotten from Barnes products here in Australia because they're pretty much the only place that we know of that you can buy this sort of stuff. Barnes did no sponsoring for this. I will get yelled at. The silicone that we've used here is specifically designed for high temperatures, and it will get about 20 to 30 casts out of it before you start to see damage to the mold.
So it does come with a microchip in it. Because you're working with silicones and stuff like that, it might wreck it. Don't know, I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to go down that pathway. So this one has already got its microchip removed.
What Chris is using here is just plasticine. You want to make sure it is a non-sulfurous plasticine. I prefer KAMEN from Barnes because that's what I like to sculpt with. Something that's a medium sort of density, not super soft, and you don't need very much of it. About 100 grams should be fine. Don't go for the really cheap stuff from the art store. If it does have sulfur in it, it will stop your silicone from curing, and this stuff can get very expensive for larger molds. So what you want to do is you want to be really, really precise, very neat with it. Everything that Chris is not being with that.
Correct.
As you work it, it gets softer, which is not usually the way that goes. We're basically just pressing a little snake of it into this edge here, and then we're using a tiny little wire tool. We'll use this side. Yeah, look at that. Yeah, like the beauty bloggers and stuff. And what we're doing is we're basically just scraping out that plasticine. We're gonna clean off the excess. With this little tool, because I'm using the corner of it, as you can see there, that little pointy bit, it's giving a really, really nice little chamfered edge in here. It's following the line of the coin, so we'll still have that nice little ridge. We'll still have that nice little ridge around that edge. And we're pushing the plasticine into that seam so that nothing else can get into that seam. It does help to not get it on the surface as much because you do have this really nice little sort of like, there's a hammered texture and stuff in there. You want to make sure that, you know, you're not f***ing that up. The more effort you put into this, the nicer your mold's going to be. The nicer your mold is, then the nicer your casts are going to be, and the less work you're going to have to do when you get to the metal part.
Yep.
You know, see this? It's all really nice. It's because somebody did this work and didn't f*** it up. So the other thing that we're doing here is we are filling in these little screw holes on the back, just with a little bit of plasticine. We just go thunk. So we've got most of our plasticine cleaned off, as you can see, all around the edge and everything like that. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna take a bit of paper towel and we're gonna take some isopropyl alcohol. Aha!
Easily found at Bunnings.
So you just spray a little bit.
Bam, and the dirt is gone.
Pretty much. And so this is just going to take off any of that residue that's on the surface. We can get a really nice, really perfect surface before we pour on all of our expensive silicone. You can see there, that surface looks freaking nice. Now that we're at this point, we're ready to try and box up our mold. So mold walls are basically just walls around your item on a bed of plasticine, which will allow us to pour in our silicon and not have it run absolutely everywhere. So what I use for the mold walls really depends on what I want to use. If I've got a bunch of...
Should look that one also.
No, fuck no, I'm looking at this one, they can't see me. Fuck. I like to use either MDF or foam core. You can either super glue the walls together or you can hot glue. Hot glue is a great idea because it's cheap. You can just, do your base and you hot glue your walls on, load everything up with hot glue, and none of your silicon's gonna run everywhere. What I'm doing here, I'm pressing down a layer of plasticine. We're gonna try and get it fairly flat, which is fine. This is basically going to be it's gonna be this bit. That bit? That bit. Yeah! It's gonna be that bit. So what we do is we basically just press the coin. We're doing this on the edge that doesn't have, we're pressing down the side that isn't clayed up so that we're not pressing clay into clay. I'm gonna carve in some registration marks here. This will align our mold so that it all locks together. And I like to go through and use a carving tool to like carve out some lines and some squiggly bits and things like that. Areas like these that you can see here, that allows the silicon to form little peaks and little tabs. And those are all different, so you can't accidentally try and lock a different side into place. It'll only go one way. So what we do now is we go through, once we've got this nice and square, we've got all our edges sorted out around here, we'd go through and we would hot glue or super glue some walls higher than our item, definitely higher. We'd say almost double the height of that, into a little box around there, seal up all the edges, and we'd pour in our silicon. This is the silicon that I've used to make this mold, and the one that we are about to show you. We're not gonna pour this on camera because it does take 2 days for it to work. This is a product called M4470. Yes, nice scientific words and all of that sort of fun shit. This is a high temperature condensation cured silicon. You don't need to pay attention to anything except for high temperature. This stuff is specifically designed to take metals like pewter into it. It means it's not going to burn and die and all that bad sort of stuff.
Yeah, so don't use pinky seal and put metal,
Yeah.
liquid metal into it.
Yeah, you could do it if you were only doing sort of 1 cast or 2 casts, but it does scorch those molds. They're not designed to go to that sort of high heats. The interesting thing about this one is it's quite a stiff silicon. Most silicons you'll see are quite rubbery, very stretchy. This is not. This is quite rigid, as you can see. Let's squeeze him that way.
Ooh.
If you try and fold this one over in half, it will die. It will just snap in half.
Compared to the pinky seal as we were talking about, look at that.
Pinky seal is super rubbery. So this is a shore hardness, I think, of 25. This is a shore hardness of 60. So it's a much stiffer silicon, but because it's that really nice, stiff, dense silicon, works really well for casting stuff into. As I said, super long working time, super long demold time. So you've got 20 to 24 hours before you're ready to pop everything over, peel out your plasticine and go for gold from there. Then you have to use a release agent. So we use a spray on release agent for silicon to silicon. Imagine, for demonstrative purposes, so it's still in its mold walls. We've poured in our silicon, yeah? So we flip it over. We peel off all of this plasticine and we've got this sitting in there, which is really nice. You'd spray a nice little layer of release agent over the top. You'd let that sit for half an hour. You'd pour in more silicon. You'd wait another day. And then you can pull it apart and you basically pull it around and it's like, oh my God, look, oh, holy shit. And you've got a mold. And that's how you make a mold, without me actually showing you how to make a mold. But we did make a mold, so we can show you the demold. Oh. After waiting large amounts of time, we have this puzzle box of silicone. We started off by building our mold wall. It's all super glued together and it's clayed up on the outside edges, as you can see there. We started off pouring in through the top, let that cure, flipped everything over, peeled out all of our plasticine. We used our release agent to make sure that it wasn't going to stick to itself. And we poured in more silicon and let that cure.
Yep.
This is the fun part where we get to see whether that release agent worked or whether we bugged it up irreparably. So what I'm going to do very carefully here is I'm going to use a screwdriver and we're going to just try and pry this apart. One of the interesting things you can see here is you can see that there is a very defined line. What we'll do is we'll just very gently start working the corners, okay? And you can see it's starting to split there. You want to be very gentle with this because it will want to tear like it's doing there. And we're slowly working it the whole way around.
Just be patient.
You may need to just score that little edge with a knife. But this time I think that's bad. That is bad.
That's 2 days wasted time.
This is why we actually probably did that side just a little bit shallow, but we might be able to save this. So what we've got there, we may actually end up using as our pour spout.
Yep.
We could be very lucky and that
too,
could work. Yep. We can slowly work it out. And look at that!
Wow.
We've got some really nice detail on the inside, which is great. The way that we want to do anything with these sort of molds is you want to be able to pour the liquid metal down through the top. You want to fill it up from the bottom, and it'll fill up through so all of your air has a chance to escape. You don't get air pockets as much. So what we're going to do for this bit is we're going to take our box cutter. There's going to be a little bit more cleanup on the top here than we would really like. Okay, that's going to be awkward as to try and pour into.
Oh well.
You want to trim off these raised edges. You can see that there's a really nice raised edge. You want to make sure that all of those edges are cut off. That means that when you're clamping it in your bracing walls, so these ones here, it means that you're not going to be distorting the silicone. We should, in theory, be able to pull a fairly okay cast from that. The only other things we need to do with this is we need to prep our mold. What we will do is we'll brush a small coat of graphite powder onto the surface here, just getting it into all of the grooves and everything like that. This will allow the air to escape. Now, I have just taken a little bit of silicone adhesive. This is just to test it, see how we're going. I have glued in this chunk that I fantastically ripped the fuck apart. This should be okay because we are using the top as a pour spout.
Yep.
So we should be fine with that. And it is going to have reinforcing with this mold wall behind it. We're going to use rubber bands just to stick everything down.
Keep the pressure together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the reason we're using rubber bands and MDF, the MDF is going to displace the pressure from the rubber bands. So it's going to spread out over the surface of the mold. That means we're going to be able to clamp this seam really nice and tightly closed without distorting the rubber. That's really important to get a really nice, clean piece without any seam lines.
Yeah, you don't want coins that are warped.
Correct. So we've got a whole lot of even pressure around there. We could actually probably go another one up on the top just to really squidge that down. Let's do that. And that pretty much holds our seams together, which is nice. It's also holding this bit in, which is even nicer. And that's going to be our pour spout through there. Really important with these, what you should be doing is preheating your molds. That will allow us to get a nicer cast.
Oh shit, shouldn't we do that?
So these have been preheated, which is great. So they're at about 60 degrees on there. It's warm to the touch. So we're gonna move our stuff out of the way. Anything that is flammable gets moved out of the way. We're going to move our work surface over just a little bit. Awesome. We're using a cheap pot. We're gonna have to melt some of this down. So it's going to be a little bit of a process to get to that. So before we start anything up, respirator.
I sound like pain. I was playing with pewter before you were even born.
So yes, definitely wear gloves because depending on what you're heating up, it will get very hot.
Correct.
With heating this, you don't really want to heat much more than you're going to pour. You don't want to be constantly heating and then cooling your metals as we go. As the metal pieces that are in here heat up, this coming into contact with it will slowly melt down as well. And I'm just going to keep swirling it around, giving it as much contact with the hot surface area as possible to give it enough of a chance to melt down. We're going to crank up the heat a little bit, and now it is time for the respirator back on.
Science, bitch. So you can see how much has melted down already off that.
Ooh.
So we've actually got a really nice little amount of liquid metal in there. What we want to do now is we're going to want to be very, very careful. Yeah, see? So like melty and liquidy.
Yeah.
And we're going to very carefully spill it everywhere.
So you can see with this how much this is expanded. This mold could probably be clamped down a little bit tighter. But again, we're just doing this as a test to see how this one works. I don't know whether it's going to work or not. This little guy here, we should be pretty right with. We'll let these cool for about 15 minutes. I think now we can unveil and see whether we had a successful pour. So all we do is we pull the rubber bands off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pull it off, and look at that. It's so pretty. It's so shiny. So it's come out really, really nice. We've got very clean casting details on that, which is great. Now, the piece of resistance. Now, we did have a lot of splaying around this seam line, so we may have some issues with that, but I guess there is only one way to find out.
Here we go.
Let's get it right up, square in your eye holes. Oh. I'd say that, even with that damaged mold,
oh, look at that.
We've got a pretty fucking nice cast. The next thing that we need to do with this is we do need to clean it up. We've got a little bit of scoring on that, but you know what? That's pretty nice.
We went ahead and made some more because we already removed them from the molds. We did have a few mistakes. We got this one right here. It's missing a bit of the top. And then from a previous attempt, we got this one that we shined up nice, but they were just like
Half filled.
Half filled, so we're gonna return them to the flyer.
And we'll get some video as they descend into madness.
We're doing this to get rid of air bubbles. All right, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna cut the tops off.
What's this wee bullshit?
All right, fine. I'm gonna cut the tops off these metals.
Do that.
Oh dear.
One of the things that you'll see us doing is cutting off the excess around these pour spouts. The really cool thing about using low melt alloys, using pewters and things like that, is if you get a cast that doesn't work, or you get offcuts like this, you can throw it back into the pot and melt it back down. It's not a one-use sort of thing like resin is. I think we should probably free these little guys from their plasticky tubes.
Wow. Perfect.
Oh yeah.
Shiny.
That's a really nice cast, that one. Yeah, it's not perfect. We got some defect, but we've noticed that we're getting an air bubble up on this top rim here.
Yep.
And the reason for that is because this pour spout isn't centered because I did a fuck up and broke the mold. And we are going to just cut. And the
Just a little bit more.
tiniest little.
Instead of it being a big hole, it ends with a little bit. Just a little bit, we're making it a bit bigger.
So you can see in that edge there. You can see up in here. You see right there. Yeah, there. That's just going to give us a little bit more of a pour spout. It's also going to give a little bit more area for the air to escape.
All right, so we got some done. There were some duds, so we had to throw back them into the fire.
Oh, we got one that's really nice.
Yeah.
That one's pretty good. So now we're going to look at the finishing and painting. As you can see, when they come out of the molds, they got this little knobby bit. And so what we need to do is cut that off. Chris has done that on these ones, and we've just used a hacksaw with a metal blade. Really nice and easy. Takes a minute to cut through, which is really nice because this is fairly soft metal. From there, we take them over to a bench grinder and we grind that down so it's nice and smooth. And these ridges that are across the sides here, we end up sanding in with a small needle file. Once you've got them all nice and sanded and ready to be sort of polished up, you've got to work out exactly what sort of finish you want. We've gone for a little bit of a tarnished surface here. So the way that we're doing that is using some black acrylic paint and a paintbrush and some paper towel. But these ones have this really nice, almost a pitted surface, which is really cool. And so you can go in and just highlight into it and it'll polish back to this really nice burnished sort of look. And you can sand that look back to get a really nice shiny finish if you'd really like to as well. Yeah. So Chris's preferred way is to sand it first. Now, when we say sanding, you can use a sanding sponge. A fine grit sanding sponge will make short work of this. Because these are so small and you've got a lot of really flat detail, we use steel wool. And so it'll polish back that surface back to the really nice shiny metal, get everything really nice and and buffed back. Yes.
Shiny.
So if you wanted to go hardcore with this as well, you could use a polishing mop on a grinding wheel. I don't have one. At some point, possibly, but at the moment, we're doing this the old-fashioned way.
Now, can't you use any of this Brasso metal polish?
You can. Because this is a metal, you can polish it with metal polish, which is really nice. You can get a really nice, like, vibrant shine. And if you really want to like sand the surface back and get it really nice and smooth and then hit it with that, you can get it to almost a mirror finish and it'll look just absolutely schmicko.
There we go.
It's looking pretty nice already. So the metals that we use do get this sort of golden color. That's just on the surface, and that's surface oxidization as it cures, or as it cools in the mold. And brushing that back with steel wool will just really clean up that look. And so here, this is just one of the raw cast ones with nice little black wash on it. And isn't that pretty?
Almost dropped it.
Let's try this again, hey?
Sure. Why don't we want to drop our coins?
It's gonna dent the shit out of it because it's a soft metal. So, we're gonna do a little bit of Brasso on this to really shine that surface up before we do our black wash. Circular motions, making sure that you get every accent. You can see how much is coming off on that. Oh, yeah. Oh. So, to do our black, we just want to get a bunch of black paint. Yes, it does seem counterintuitive to go through and put a bunch of black paint on this. And that will settle in all the nooks and crannies and just really highlights what we've been working with. And the best thing about that is you can go back in and you can highlight certain areas. You want to do this before it goes completely dry, but you can buff it off while it's dry as well, which is great. And we're not pressing too hard. We are just sort of lightly dragging the paper towel over the surface to really just pick up those angles and all those edges and all that lovely detail that we spent ages of time trying to mold and cast up. And look at that. That's pretty. Oh yeah.
Marvelous. Just starting to look like it's brothers.
And that's pretty much it. That's how to cast that up in what, like 18 hours?
So yes, as he said, that's how you will cast cell metals from Kamen Rider OOOs in pewter. Take what we said as a guide, do a bit of research also. Don't just go YOLO, this is the definitive guide on how to do it. No.
There are some fantastic tutorials on casting in pewter online. That's how I learned to do it. There are some really, really good ways on how to do things without being super dangerous with it. So definitely watch as many tutorials as you can, not just ours. Get a really good feel for exactly what you're trying to do. Plan out your mold properly.
Yep.
Don't break your mold while you're filming like I did. And just make sure that you know exactly what you're getting into before you start pouring molten metal around.
But yeah, once again, big thanks to CBStudios for coming on and helping us out. CBStudios at Instagram, where he's always posting a lot of his horror stuff. Once again, thank you so much for viewing. Please like and subscribe to help this channel grow. Facebook, we got that. There's the link somewhere. Just let me grab it. There's Instagram. There is the Twitch. So no, and there's and there's the Twitter. So Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. We do have a Twitch where we will live stream some stuff, mainly video games. Maybe we'll do one of these one day live, but it'll just be chaos. But we hope to see you in the next video. Catch ya. Bye.